come today as those who mourn and are in need of God's comfort. As we are confronted with the death of Nancy Banner, a wife, mother, a grandmother, sister, and friend, we gather in this space at Ardmore Baptist Church because it's where Nancy and Reg planted themselves in a faith community. This faith community became an important source of sustenance for Nancy and Reg as she battled cancer in her last days. Today, in the midst of our grief, we proclaim with Job, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself." Would you join me as we pray together? Merciful Father and Lord of all life, we praise you that we are made in your image and reflect your truth and light. We thank you for the life of your child, Nancy Banner, for the love she received from you and showed among us. We thank you for the 51 years of marriage you gave to her and Reg. We thank you for the gift of their children, Mary Margaret, James, and Joe, as well as their grandchildren, Charlotte, Walker, Blake, Barrett, and Bradshaw. Above all, we rejoice at your gracious promise to all your servants, living and departed, that we shall rise again at the coming of Christ. And we ask that in due time that we may share with Nancy that clearer vision when we shall see your face in the same Jesus Christ, our Lord, in whose name we pray. Amen.
My Nana wanted me to read this. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.
It was almost 20 years ago that two young people, at the start of their lives together, moved to a town many call Mayberry. But to us and our kids, it has become home. The reason for this? In word, Nancy. Later, to become Nana to our children. But it was in the spring of 1995 that May and I first met Nancy. After our tour of the first home that Reg and Nancy built, which they were selling at the time, we spent 2 hours sitting around Nancy's kitchen table, just talking and laughing, while Reg was outside working on his '56 Chrysler. It was in the kitchen in '95 that Nancy gave us our first, best, and most practical piece of advice. Because she thought hers was too much house for us, she suggested that we buy the house up the street that would eventually become our home. The wonderful thing about Nancy's advice is that it brought us into a neighborhood where Reg and Nancy's friends became our friends. Without that advice, we might not have ended up at their house that Christmas Eve to drop off a gift for Max, their Sheltie. After being invited in, we ended up joining them as the Banners opened their presents, laughing and joking and sharing stories. At the same time, the Banner family, led by Reg and Nancy, opened their arms to May and to me. We have been blessed to be a part of the family going on 20 years, but it also to laugh, often at herself, and her ability to make others know that they are loved. May and I could not have asked for a better friend. Through Reg and Nancy, I have been blessed to witness what true love and commitment is. No better testimony of their partnership can be found than in the letter I'm about to read to you. Penned by Reg to Nancy back in 1993 on the occasion of Nancy's 51st birthday. Excuse me, this is a dot matrix print, so. June 9th, 1993. My dear Nancy, we hear people say, I wish I could live my life over. I would do this and I would change that, but not me. If God dropped in one day and offered me a deal to relive my life, I would politely ask him to leave. It is like gambling. You have to know when you've got a winning hand, or when you want to bet on getting a better one. And I don't want to receive any more cards. I choose to hold the ones I have. You are my lucky charm. My memories are flooded with your love for me and our family. We have been together for almost 30 years, and I can recall many of the struggles together. When the big bear called me for overdoing our account. When you had to go back to the hospital in tears to recuperate after each of our children. And after each of our children were born. Each time we moved to another apartment or rent house, and how you would pack up everything so efficiently. How you stood by me as I switched jobs from one place to another. With your support and sacrifice, we changed the direction of our lives when I returned to college. You were great, and without you, it would have never worked. Although it did result in you moving to Mayberry and crying all the way. Thank you for being a great mom for our children. You have been a master at selecting affordable Christmases by using the Sears Wish Book or the J.C. Penney or Brendel's catalogs. Everyone always received about what they asked for, and it had to be equal. Thanks for making holidays such special occasions. Our children will always remember the crafty decorations, ranging from goblins to white that you prepared every year. Our summer vacations were always a smashing success. You would order rental brochures from all the realtors and rent us a place to stay. After washing and ironing and packing clothes and toys, we would be so journey proud that we could not sleep the night before. And the next day we're asked a dozen times, Mommy, Daddy, how much further? You always knew who was on first, when school pictures were to be made, when we would go to the lunchroom to eat with the kids, when the achievement tests were, and Reg, you had better be nice to the kids that morning. And let's not forget who has doctor's appointments and when. I can still see you canning green beans, freezing strawberries, or picking blueberries, and trying to save $1 on groceries. Thank you for caring. Sometimes I miss our past, when our days were busy and vibrant with our children's activities and our struggles to make ends meet, but those will always be magic memories of which we can be proud. I feel sorry for those people who have never known such happiness. Now the circle has almost made a full turn, and we are once again together alone. I do not wish for greener pastures or something new and exciting. I am thankful for the many blessings that we have been able to share together. You are my partner. Someone that has walked the worthy paths with me. We have shared something special. We will not pass that way again, but we can rest our case that we did a good job. Let us feel a sense of pride in our accomplishments together. You have made my life and our children's lives so very full and exciting, and I thank you for being such a wonderful wife. You will always be my sweetheart. The girl I fell in love with only 30 years ago. Can you believe it? It seems only a few years ago they were fussing and feuding and being young and in love. I look forward to many more happy years with you, but even if God should choose to call me tomorrow, I could leave with a wonderful peace of mind that I have received many blessings in this life beyond my expectations, thanks to you. Happy birthday to you. Love, Reg.
Lord, I confess that when you're here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Your grace is found, is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. To teach my soul to rise to you. When temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. 'Cause Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Hey, Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
As much as I wish I could say that, I had nothing to do with that. Clearly comes from one side of the family, but we'll take credit for it. My mom took her job very seriously. Being a homemaker was her pride and her joy. Joe found this over the past few days. It's a folder. It has tips. Every single little mom household tip you can think of is in here. stings, Lyme's disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Streaks are a sign of an infection. Gargling with salt water for a sore throat. All of these things are in here, and they all affected Joe or I or Margaret at some point. Along with this folder that we'll keep forever, my mom passed along several guidelines about raising children. So I thought I would talk about 4 of these today really quick. And I'm not used to sermons, but they usually give bullet points, so I'm going to talk about 4 things. The first one was fluids and the importance of fluids in children. Mom learned the importance of fluids from Dr. Charles Staney here in Winston-Salem. Now, Dr. Staney, my mom would do anything Dr. Staney said. If he said to perform a sick dance, if he said that we had to stand on our head for our fever to go down, we would have been doing it. But he had always stressed fluids. When any of us were sick, ginger ale and saltines were a staple. If we were constipated, drink more water. If we had a headache, drink some water. I started running when I moved to Winston after I met Claudia, and I would usually try to allow my route to go by the house. And when I would go by there and I would be hot and sweaty, and she would say, "Oh, you need to just stop, drink, drink, drink." And so I would drink, and then right before I would stop, I would leave, she would vehemently try to convince me to let Dad take me home. She respected all of us staying fit, but not if it caused you to sweat. That was something that wasn't right. So that was the number 1 guideline. Make sure your children drink their fluids. Number 2 is food. You need to eat. 3 solid meals. Mom believed in a hot breakfast, a good lunch, and a sit-down, home-cooked dinner. I'm so lucky that my mother-in-law, Jane Goins, is of the same mold because we eat very, very little all the time in our house. Each day before school, Mom would have bacon and eggs. She'd have warm blueberry muffins, cinnamon toast, French toast. At night, we would gather for a family dinner and sit down every night. We may be 3 football fields away with the cooks or in the middle of who knows field, but we knew to be home because we had a hot dinner waiting. For this reason, she didn't like wrestling. She hated wrestling. When I would come home from science and math, and I knew there was a big match coming up, and of course I would not be eating a whole lot because I knew I had to. The lower you weigh, the higher the odds were you were wrestling a freshman or someone that didn't know what they were doing. So I wanted to be really light, and I would come home, there'd be a strawberry shortcake or a coconut pie. She'd have a milkshake at the dinner table, all for me. And if I didn't eat it, it was not a good night. So number 2 guideline was to feed your children at least 3 times a day and be sure they eat it. The third one is patience. Now, Mom taught patience to myself more as a parent than when I was a child. Claudia and I listened to Dr. Charles Stanley and his videos to give us insight. Now, we know Mimi and we know Nana had 30 years of experience, but what do they know? I mean, I looked at Joe and Mary Margaret and thought, wait a minute, something's wrong. I was just lucky. So I said, wait. Dr. Stanley, he believed in clearly defined rules and, more importantly, making sure both parents they support each other's decisions and you don't confuse the child. Well, a weekend at Nana's goes completely against that. It meant donuts, milkshakes, banana splits at breakfast, lunch, dinner for snacks. It meant eating in the bed. It meant staying in pajamas all day. It meant going to Walmart, and every time you go, you get 1 or 2 presents every single time you go. It meant stopping at Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, and Hardee's, all at the same lunch period because we have 3 children and they never want to go to the same spot. It meant for Blake and the others, letting them help in the kitchen. Not just watch, but actually help and stir and break the eggs and all of those things that most parents don't ever think to let their child do. But basically, it meant that you never heard the word no. Joe aptly put it in the obituary, but you never heard that word no. And so the patience that Claudia and I have learned is you have to let your grandchildren play a part and have patience that they are going to undo everything you do all week and just going to spend the next week catching them. The last guideline that I have was open communication, and this one was the most special between my mom and I. We had a great relationship. I remember coming in each night and we would lay on the bed and we would just talk. We talked about all of the troublesome friends that I hung out with because I was the one that was choosing the high road. We talked about the girls that I was dating, and she would always ask about their parents and where their parents were from, and that she knew one of them's sister, and all about that. She would go on and on about how special I was among the two other brothers and sisters. We would talk late into the night, and in a time before Facebook, I could trust my mom. I could tell her stuff that realistically my friends may not have wanted me to tell her, but she wasn't going to go tell everyone or post it to anyone. She was going to keep it to herself. So that last guideline to summarize is talk to your children. Allow them to be open and be careful how you handle and treat what you hear. She taught me many, many more things, but in hindsight, she could have taught Dr. Stanley and Dr. Stanley a few things of her own. Most importantly, I experienced a mother's love. I saw it, and I lived it, and I continue to feel it. I should have taken those edits. Mom, I will miss you each moment of every day, and I cannot wait to lay in your bed in heaven one day and catch you up on everything that's happened. I love you.
As Lee's letter that you read, and James's comments earlier reinforced, Mom adored her family. Spending time with her children and her grandchildren warmed her heart. Mom anticipated our wants and our needs, and she worked hard to surround us with comfort, a home full of love and security. She wanted to protect us from the harsh realities of the world, but prepare us to succeed and be happy in that same world. So Mom kept a calendar by the telephone, and as the letter that Lee read earlier alluded, she kept everything on that calendar. As a matter of fact, if we go back today and pull her calendar from 1982, we will know when the Raven physicals were due. We will know when someone had a tick, and 2 weeks later, they showed any signs. Dad did not have to worry about anything. Mom told him when the spelling bee took place. Mom made sure that our dental appointments were taken care of. Those calendars, if you flip through those, were really a snapshot of those wonderful years growing up with the family. But Mom's love created somewhat of a paradox, best understood only by the mothers here today. For as much as Mom loved to have us nearby, and would have been very pleased if we all stayed in Mount Airy and gone to school in the area, the wonderful aspect of her love is that despite her desire to keep us close and safe, another desire outweighed that, which was to make sure we had every opportunity to succeed, even if that pursuit of success took us far from home and away from her love and her warm embrace. Mom held us to the highest standards and was content with nothing less than our best. Perhaps she was a master of some motherly psychology that created the conditions in our home where James, May, Margaret, and I held ourselves to very high standards. All the while Mom complained that we worked too much, or that the teachers assigned too much homework, or that we needed to take a break more often. We needed to sleep in more often. However, we knew that Mom would be unhappy if we let our standards slip, if we failed to reach our potential. So we're thankful for her for masterfully creating that dynamic where we pushed ourselves to strive for success, while she reminded us to take time out for ourselves. I'll share a story to illustrate that point. I decided I was going to enter the North Carolina Transportation School Bus Poster Safety Contest. 6th grade. And I was not going to enter the contest, I was going to enter the winning submission. So I stayed up most of the night at the dining room table in 6th grade making the perfect poster for this school bus safety contest. The next morning, had my poster ready and was heading to school. I complained I didn't have any time. I didn't have time between Boy Scouts or my practice for sports or my church activities. I didn't have time just to relax or play basketball. I mean, Margaret and James would tell you that hasn't changed today. That's still the conditions for me to stay that busy. But Mom heard that, and she dropped me off to school. An hour later, I looked up, and there was Mom standing in the doorway of Mr. Hill's classroom. And those of you who know Robert Hill, he was a very imposing, stern teacher. I loved his teaching style. And there he was, and there's Mom standing in the doorway, and I watched what was about to take place. He walked over to the doorway, and he stood there. He looked at her, he looked at me, he looked at her, he looked at me. Mr. Banner, please come up here. So I walked up, and he looked at me and said, Mr. Banner, your mom seems to think that you've been working too hard. That you need to gather all your books and go home and take the rest of the day off. So I gathered my books, didn't say a word. Got in the car with Mom and said, what's going on? And she said, well, I just think you need a day off. You've been working too hard. We're going to go to Randomans and eat lunch, and you're going to go home and just play basketball the rest of the day. So, of course, when James got home from school, he was wondering what was going on. Did Mom pull you out of school for working too hard? I didn't think so. Mom did it here, the old school thought that it isn't the destination, it's the journey that counts. The true joy of life is the trip itself. And perhaps that healthy perspective was what grounded Mom in her younger years, to enjoy the moment, to ensure that she and Dad had the foundation for success. Some of you may not know, Mom and Dad were in the first grade together. There's a photo during the visitation of them in 8th grade at the school play, Hansel and Gretel, holding hands in 8th grade. They were baptized on the same night when they were 12 years old. And after they were married, Dad decided he wanted to go back to school. It was Mom who decided to work full-time to support Dad so he could pursue his dreams. She agreed to move in with her mother-in-law, which that in itself is an act that certainly recognizes that living in the moment, and living in the now, and is the rewards related, let's put it that way. So I admire the fact that she did that. And of course, knowing that Mom had this laughter, all of her Blue Jay Jones School classmates for a year remember that laughter. And the grandkids were sitting around, we were looking at photos every night, and there were several photos of Mom in the throes of that great laugh she used to throw. And I think the grandkids sometimes forget Mom was quite an athlete. She loved to have fun. As a matter of fact, there's a quick story I'll share that Dad came home from work and was out in the yard, the way Mom tells it. Dad was in the yard, he was throwing ball at neighborhood kids. Mom was inside cooking dinner. James and I were probably not even a year old yet. We were underfoot, she was trying to make things happen. And one of the local neighborhood boys, who was 16 years old, was bragging about how fast he could run. My dad was throwing the ball and he said, are you kidding? My wife in there could outrun me. So he walked in, Nancy, I need you to come out and race this kid. So Mom took her apron off. I don't know what happened to James, but she walked out and she beat this young man in a foot race. And he held his head down and it must have disappeared. Mom went back, put her apron back on, and kept going. I know that we're sharing a lot of great memories with a good friend, Diane Lowry, and Mr. Lowry was sharing with me that we had a cookout in the backyard one day, and we decided we were going to challenge Mom to a foot race. So sure enough, we lined up in the backyard, and Mom outran everyone who was there. Well, it didn't stop there. We took to Washington, D.C. Coming out of the Smithsonian, Mom had organized a bus tour for the family to go to Washington. I'm walking up to the bus, and all of a sudden the bus driver and Mom flew right past me. She had challenged the bus driver to a foot race, or vice versa. And I think Claudia was introduced to this during our Banner Family Olympics at the beach. Mom loved to have fun, loved to organize an Olympics on the beach. We would compete in anything we could do out there. Sure enough, we had a foot race, and of course, Claudia's the consummate competitor, was a collegiate swimmer in Carolina, and was a nationally ranked triathlete, so she got out there and thought, well, here we go. And they took off, and Mom beat all women on the beach that day. That was, not even 10 years ago. So, but really the purpose of that is to illustrate Mom loves fun, family-focused fun, loved to laugh, and that's something that that we are going to keep in our hearts. I know that the ability to, anytime the family's together, to think about Nana in a way that reminds us to stop, enjoy that moment, enjoy the trip. And lastly, while we're talking about running, those of you who lived in Peakland Place in Mount Airy knew that Mom kept a garden. And you all knew when she first saw her first snake of the summer. She would take off, and for the rest of the summer, the garden would just grow over. She wouldn't go near it. So James and I were still on patrols out to find squash, or tomatoes, or anything we could, because we all knew that after that first snake of the year, Mom didn't go near the garden. There were several times she called out neighbors, Kyle Henley, and a few others to investigate a snake in the garage. One time it was a hose, one time it was a rope, one time it was a cantaloupe rind. All those supposedly were snakes. The neighborhood was a wonderful place in which to grow up. Mom kept the house open for all the neighborhood kids. The porch was always welcome. A lot of my friends and neighbors from Peakland Place and friends growing up who drove a long distance today told me earlier this week that they considered Mom almost like their second mom, and that they wanted to be there during our days growing up. Being at the Banner House was a welcome place. Mom made them feel just as welcome as if they were her own children. And finally, I'll just close with a thought. Mom passed Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday night, the family had gathered, and James' son Bear offered a prayer. And through the eyes of a child, where the innocence of this prayer illustrates what we remember about Mom and how we want to remember her. Barrett said, God, there's been a lot of crying here today. But it's okay to cry, God, because today is a good day to cry. God, we thank you that Nana is now running and laughing without any tubes or cords. And Barrett, you were so right. That's what Mom would want us to do. To run, to play, to laugh, to eat more ice cream, to sleep in late, to laugh more, to cry less, to enjoy the trip, and remember we are truly blessed. Thank you, Mom, for pouring your life into ours and teaching us that when thoughts of you or your love are in our hearts, we are never far from home. I love you.
When I was visiting with the family this week, one of the important texts that they wanted heard and read at this service was a text that they believed very much personified their mother and comes from the Old Testament, Proverbs chapter 21. And verses 25 through 29 are recorded in your bulletin, and I will read those. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Today our worship of God has been prompted by the virtuous life of one of God's children. And as we reflect on the life of Nancy Banner, we hear her children rising up and calling her blessed. And we listen to her husband shower her with thanksgiving. And we are tempted to confine our thinking to the present, or at best to the last 72 years. My task in these few minutes is to offer some context for the gathering of this day. And the context for our worship is older than any written knowledge of our own nation. The words from Proverbs that I just read are words of wisdom from a mother, offering direction for her son, whose name was King Lemuel. Directions so that he might find a virtuous wife. It is an acrostic poem containing 22 verses, each verse beginning with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. This mother was trying to help her son memorize a list of virtues so that he might find a wife and live a life and enjoy prosperity and happiness for his family. King Solomon, the great editor of this book, selected this poem to include in his larger book of wisdom, no doubt because he found this letter from this mother filled with wisdom. The point of this context is to make the case that Reg and Nancy's love for one another didn't begin 51 years ago when they were first married, or even years before that when Reg was smitten with that pretty head cheerleader at Mount Airy High School. It really begins 3,000 years ago, when the leading wisdom scholars among the people of God published these attributes of a virtuous woman. This poem exalting the virtuous woman shaped who Nancy Banner was and shaped who she became as the mother and leader of your family in so many ways. So praising these things reminds the old of what it is we should be aiming for each day and instructs the young on elements of life well lived. We do it to make the image broader for a moment and free ourselves of cynicism. And we do it in a sanctuary, a place pointing to the transcendent, to remind ourselves that what we are doing and singing and saying is really beyond words. Nevertheless, it is with words, audacious representatives of reality, that we celebrate the life of Nancy Banner and proclaim our faith in the resurrection as the gift of the one who resurrected our Lord, Jesus Christ. The poem from Proverbs becomes a wonderful template by which we will try to do this. And I want to share briefly 3 points. And James, if you had gone to seminary, you would learn that sermons are supposed to be 3 points instead of 4. But I understand that Nancy was such a wonderful woman that 3 couldn't contain it, so you had to give it extra. But I'm going to stick with 3. 3 points from this text. So, Proverbs 31. They tell about 3 gifts that she has given to her family and to all of us. And the first gift is the gift for security for her family. One of the great gifts a mother or father can give to their children is the gift of security for that day. The gift of feeling safe. The gift of feeling loved. The gift of being present no matter what's going on in the world. Nancy, as we've heard, was devoted to her family, and giving them this gift was a secure present. The poet and author of this biblical text wrote earlier in verse 15, she gets up while it is still dark, she provides food for her family. He adds later, her children rise and call her blessed. Mary Margaret, James, and Joe have the joy, in the midst of their sorrow of facing their mother's death, of calling her blessed. They are able to praise their mother because they remember her devotion to them. Each night, no matter how stressful their day or hectic their schedule, she would have this hot, home-cooked meal for them. It's interesting to note that academic studies have been done to determine what factors in for high SAT scores in our nation. And one of the prevailing factors predicting success on the SAT exams is how often the family sits down to an evening meal together. The more regular those evening meals are, studies show, the higher the test scores. Now, there are many theories as to why this is so consistently true, but one reason, no doubt, is that such an environment increases this feeling of security, a feeling of peace. This gift of security had all the makings of a mother bear watching out for her cubs. While she maintained the right to discipline as needed, she did not necessarily take kindly to an outsider trying to do the same. Her devotion was so focused that, as you heard, I think it was Joe, you were talking about the day that you had off. I thought she gave it to all of you guys, but I'm finding out it's just for you. Wow. But she was in tune enough with her children to recognize what they needed. And even though she had high standards, she recognized there may be a time when you need to step back and chill out. Such a gift, as the poet says, is worth far more than rubies. It creates a peace of mind for humans who need and want unconditional love. It makes a husband want to come home at the end of the day. It motivates children to honor their mother at the end of life. It gives grandchildren shoulders upon which to stand and see a world beyond their backyard. It is a gift pure and simple because we can do nothing, and you could have done nothing to pay for it. A second gift she has given to her family, and therefore to all of us, is the gift of loving their father. Nancy gave her family a genuine love for her husband. The poet who penned this classic piece of Holy Scripture described her thus: her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. Later in the poem, we discover again the words, her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Her husband praises her for all the virtues that have been on display in this poem. He praises her strength, diligence, wisdom, and charm. And though it's not explicitly named in the poem, lurking underneath all this praise offered to her is her love for her husband. His business associates recognize the virtue of his wife. The children observe the love and are ultimately shaped by its positive effects. It is a real good for children to see their mother love their father. How sad it is when children grow up under the negative, nagging, whining spirit of a mother constantly undermining the vigor and vitality of their father. Children need to see their father in the best light possible. In fact, when the teenage years come and they begin to push back, the teenagers begin to push back against all authority in their way to freedom, the mother will need a strong ally to keep them in line. She will need a husband who has been built up and respected in the eyes of the children. And of course, the reverse of that is true as well. Nancy offered that kind of love to Reg, who returned it with gratitude. The letter that you heard Reverend Daniels read earlier in the service is but one small testimony to that effect. In doing this, Nancy and Reg were following the later teachings in the New Testament, where Paul writes, each one of you, speaking to husbands, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, we don't need to get into a debate about differentiating love and respect to see that Paul is using both of these, love and respect, as twin pillars for holding up a Christian marriage. When a husband and wife love and respect each other in the